Chapter 17. The Young Man from France, Satan's Prophet. Claude Varil made some good proposals to start with, but we all know that some or none of these shall become a reality, not in his lifetime anyway. They shall remain nothing but beautiful dreams. But when such a dreamer proceeds to make those dreams a reality, when he begins planning power takeovers and coups to forcefully place his hypnotized dupes of scientists in office, the world should pay attention. When he begins talking about bombs with paralyzing substances and revolutionary commandos, humanity should sit up and listen. We would have nothing to worry about if there had been no mention of Satan. Satan, who has always hated humanity, and who is the bitterest enemy of our creators and of our God. Satan, who has sworn to destroy God's most cherished, most perfect, ultimate creation, humanity. Satan, who has no intention of leaving one single human being alive, not even the naive Claude Varil, if he was alive when he had come. And the poor little man is foolish and stupid enough to believe that he would be an exception. Varil is lying his way straight to hell and damnation. Anyway, Claude Varil knows himself that he is lost. He knows that God exists, but he sold his soul to Satan and the renegades for a life of parasitic pleasure on earth now, and for the deflowering of as many innocent virgin victims as he could. I witnessed Elianin beseeching him not to start his Satan-worshipping movement, but he refused to listen to them and turned them down. Now he has tied over 50,000 human beings with the same chains that bind him, dragging all of them with him to perdition. Also we know that everyone involved with Satan is always asked to bring in as many human souls as possible to pledge allegiance to Satan. Raelians, remember these words, when they ask you to fill in apostasy forms and send them to your respective churches, synagogues, temples, and mosques, and to transmit those codes. Humanity does not want Satan on earth. We do not want his government. In fact, we need him as much as we need a nuclear war. Satan is definitely an undesirable on this planet. He is the enemy of our God and Father. He is also the enemy of our Creator Yahweh, the leader of Elianin. After thousands of years of fighting, of hatred, and of sabotaging Yahweh's precious work, Satan is spreading his illness all over the world again through Varil, both religiously and politically. But Varil had the choice and opportunity to change his mind and to refuse to serve Satan when Elianin asked him before me to reject Satan's offers. Unfortunately, he refused to listen to them. Had he done so, they would have helped him and made sure that Satan no longer had access to him. His refusal allowed Satan to use him to spread his lies. And to lie so stupidly and so shamelessly, Satan had to rid Varil of his will to rebel, so as he revealed himself, his mind was altered. That change produced in him a state of controlled psychopathy. For there is absolutely nothing concerning God that Varil does not know. He knows that he was asked to tell lies. He knows that there is truly a God. He knew that Belial, Lucifer, and Satan were lying, and Satan was lying when he presented himself to him as Yahweh. But he still went ahead and wrote his book. For the puny Frenchman who claims to have been sent by Yahweh does not spread any of God's doctrines or Yahweh's teachings. I shall remind the world again of exactly what he claims and teaches, and the kinds of ceremonies he and his followers hold. Recapitulating Varil's blasphemies. Varil calls God dog all the time, instead of God, then pretends to have made a mistake. But the frequency with which I heard him say that was indicative to the fact that he has been doing it for years, and that even if he tried to do it properly, he would be incapable, without real discipline. Calling God dog is a hateful insult of the worst kind. Any prophet calling himself that would never amuse himself with reversing the letters of the word God that way. But we know that it is the habit of Satanists to always reverse names like God, Emmanuel, Jesus, etc. He says that Jesus is not the one that was predicted by the prophets to come on earth 2,000 years ago. He claims to be the true Messiah, and that Jesus was just sent to prepare his way, to announce him, Claude Varil, as the Messiah, the prophet of Apocalypse. If we are to believe the prophecies that were made in the writings of Daniel 600 years before Jesus was born, as well as Isaiah's, and the events which took place when and after Jesus was born, we would all be inclined to believe that Jesus was indeed prophesied about. Even though he was not actually named as the future Messiah, at least 4 prophets predicted that a boy like Jesus should be born in Israel at the time when he did. But where, in which book was it exactly announced that the Messiah would be called Claude Virilne? Who made such a prediction and when? Virilne announced that he was the biological younger half-brother of Jesus of Nazareth, but even though he knows that this is not true, he has even begun to believe it himself. In fact, at the stage in which he is now, Claude Virilne no longer knows where reality ends and fiction and fantasy begin. What a shame that he should so shamelessly enjoy the divine honor of our God, and of Jesus and Yahweh, when he so fanatically proclaims that there is no God. He denies that right to Yeshua, then he gets the Raelians to worship him himself. He hates the Pope with a maniacal obsession, and did not fail to attack him in his books. If he loved Yahweh and if he was indeed sent by him, he would not hate the Pope so much at all. He accuses the Roman Catholic Church of enriching itself at the expense of poor people, and now he himself lives as a parasite of the poor souls that he has fooled and enslaved. He has sponged so much from them that he now owns many homes including a villa in Spain, as was the situation in 1993. All the prophets that have ever been known as such have always refused to amass riches, yet Claude Virilne had a fund opened many years ago, the Raelian Foundation, which has no other use than to keep him, his mistresses, the wife of the moment, and his children in luxury. And the fund is regularly fed by donations conned from gullible people. For his regular tours, his lackeys are told that he should be booked only in the best hotels, always 5-star, or at least 4-star hotels. And only the best restaurants in town would do. That from an honest prophet who claims that he does not like money. His satanic religion is nothing but a colossal empirical business, while he claims that it has no lucrative aims. He is also preying on old folks, asking them to plan their retreat and to go and stay in his pleasure and culture camps, which are no different from any other holiday camps. But there the similarity stops, because at those camps, the worst of devil worship-like practices and consecrations to Satan take place. Virilne's first satanic temple, the Camp Eden. The name of his first camp in France was Camp Eden. But let all Raelians know, if they do not already, that Rael's development is the same as the one that was applied to Gurdjieff by the same Elohims that met Rael, before he went to be taught in that Tibetan monastery. Gurdjieff went on to found the Society of the Green Dragon. He described his mind-awakening techniques, my very special way to develop the hidden potentialities of man, a way that is against morals, against God. If Gurdjieff talked about God, it can only mean that he, the atheist, knew that God exists. Am I not right in declaring that Gurdjieff was not an atheist but a Satanist? How could Virilne then have been sent by Yahweh, when he teaches Gurdjieff's doctrines which are against God? Yahweh is not against God. Am I not also therefore right in affirming again that Claude Virilne is not an atheist, but a Satanist? The dragon, or serpent, in all the scriptures has always been the name for Satan, Lucifer, or all the renegades as a group. And Satan has been described by Virilne himself. His skin color is a mongoloid yellow, with a greenish jaundiced hue. That is exactly what Satan looked like, when Elianin showed me a film of him. Virilne at his camps tells his followers that he teaches them how to awaken their minds and bodies and human potential. The word nature connected with the initials EDEN by Virilne is of a different kind. It is the same that is profusely discussed in Hitler's Table Talks by Martin Bormann. All of it is a hateful doctrine against God. The nature described here is another word for materialism. He seals people to Satan by doing what he calls transmission of the cellular code. After asking questions to scientists, Virilne has given a scientific explanation to this act, but other famous Satanists define it differently. Bakunin said, Satan impresses the seal of humanity, materialism, and liberty on people's foreheads by making them disobedient. And all over the earth, over 50,000 people have been sealed to Satan, by an evil and cunning, ruthless and remorseless liar. Virilne pretended to support Jesus in the book he used to lure decent, God-fearing people into his claws, but at his meetings at his camp, he teaches that in the Bible, apart from the books of the Genesis up to Moses' Acts, everything is a lie, and none of the teachings are true or valid. And let's not forget that Viriln is a Jew, or as he prefers to say, the son of a Jew. He says that to begin with, the Bible is an atheist, or a Satanist, book. Yet he used the writings of all the biblical prophets and turned them into a best-selling book. Next he says, and has even printed on pamphlets, that Jesus never suffered on the cross. He argues, what father would let his son suffer such pain? Well, Claude Viriln, it is a father who is in accord with the son, who wants what the son wants and is of the same opinion with him, and who therefore and nonetheless suffered at the same time as the son. Jesus had come to realize his divinity, and he chose to do it his own way. Jesus was a prophet who did not lie, and who cared enough for his followers, for his work and its success, to die for it. Jesus really did suffer on the cross. Besides, Jesus' biological father, Joseph, was dead by the time he was crucified, so he did not let Jesus suffer that pain. And let us not forget that Yeshua also used his own free will to die. He had the choice and let himself be captured. He wanted to die. Viriln claims that Satan and his extraterrestrials came and took his body and disposed of it, then they recreated him in their machine. That is not true. He says in his book that it was right for people to go to church, but in private, he tells his followers not to enter any churches or religious edifices, because it is not necessary. But I know that he says it because he hates going inside church buildings himself. He orders all his followers to apostasy from their religions. They must even sign apostasy acts, which they must send their religions, together with letters of rejection of God. So Rael and the extraterrestrials who sent him teach people to go against our God, because that extraterrestrial, the one who claimed to be his father, was not Yahweh, the leader of Elianan. My proof of this is, if the reader still does not believe the story that Elianan told me, remember when people said that Jesus cured by the power of Satan, he said to them, every kingdom divided against itself in groups which fight each other, will not last. And no city or house divided against itself will stand, and if one group is fighting against another in Satan's kingdom, this means that it is already divided into groups and will soon fall apart. No, it is not Satan, but God's Spirit who gives me the power to chase demons, which proves that the kingdom of God has already come upon you. No one can break into a strong man's house and take away his belongings unless he first ties up the strong man. Then he can plunder his house. Anyone who is not for me is really against me. Anyone who does not help me to gather is really scattering. Matthew 12:27-30. Here you see clearly that Jesus and Yahweh are opposed to Satan. They are not friends like Claude Viriln is trying to fool Raelians into believing. And Rael is not helping Jesus to gather people in the love of God. He is scattering. Not a single one of Jesus' teachings was ever given at the Camp Eden. Viriln was therefore not sent by Yahweh, for Yahweh cannot go against himself. And that's not all. He rants and raves hatefully about the Templars having been persecuted by the early Roman Catholic Church. But which Templars is he talking about? None other than the ones belonging to groups similar to the one set by Lans von Lebensfels, the renegade Cistercian monk, and one of the satanic messiahs about whom I wrote earlier on. They were those who used swastikas and followed and worshipped Satan. But also let us not forget that the Templars were themselves part of the Catholic Church. It was only after their interests became opposed that the Church began its campaign against those Templars. And those Templars had also persecuted innocent and ordinary people in the name of the Church. And Claude Viriln has stupidly followed in their footsteps and teaches his socio-biological doctrines. Lebensfels wrote a long-titled book, Theozoology, or the Account of the Apes of Sodom and the Divine Election, an introduction into the earliest and the most modern world philosophy and a justification for the orders of princes and aristocracy. Rael preaches Lebensfels' Teutonic Arianism and his anti-urbanism. Viriln writes of his Aryan group as a whole worldwide one. He is very obsessively somatological and biological. So much that his ideas of birth control will be a compulsory law when his geniocratic dream government takes over. But only where Lebensfels was merely anti-Semitic, Viriln is anti-human. He has concocted a lethal cocktail of a mixture of ideas of such people as Hitler, Gurdjieff, Lebensfels, Houston Stewart Chamberlain, Nietzsche and the rest. Virilm with his dream of a geniocratic world-dominated government is a ticking time bomb that would explode one day. And what he is planning to do is a worldwide mass murder of human beings, mostly those who believe in a god. Rites and ceremonies at Raelian camps. In the true tradition of the ancient order of New Templars, and of Aleister Crowley's Abbey of Thelema, these are the initiation ceremonies that the Raelians have to go through. On the first day of his yearly stages of development, which is the 6th of August, and first day of the Raelian year, all new visitors or members have to humiliate themselves by climbing on the podium and undressing totally, then they have to introduce themselves. I guess it is a clever way for them to uncover spies, for they quiz those who refuse to undress and expose themselves. They are all asked to dress as perfect transvestites and find themselves partners. Men dress as women and women as men. Everyone is told to have homosexual partners and not to refuse themselves to anyone of the same sex, whether they like it or not, and even those who are not that way inclined. Then they are all asked to demonstrate their acceptance of, and their obedience to Satan, Rael's Elohim, by stamping and walking on the cross. A cross is brought, with the image of Jesus on it, and people have to stamp and spit on the image of Jesus, to show their rejection of him, of the church and of faith in God in general. Claude Virilm tells them that it is a ritual that was rigorous with the Templars, and they were a religious order approved by his Elohim. And he explains to them that the Elohim approved to people walking, jumping and spitting on the cross because it was an instrument of torture. And that Yahweh is angry about Jesus having been crucified by the Jews, that is why he wants all humans to stamp and spit on it. Once and for all, Jesus himself was a Jew. Why are the Jews always referred to in this matter as if Jesus had been a foreigner to them? Jesus' business was strictly Jewish business. But we all know now that those particular Templars were Satanists, and Rael usually refuses to tell people which Elohim he talks about. But we know now that his Elohim are a whole legion of them, and they are opposed to Jesus, to Yahweh, the leader of Elianan, and to God Most High. Walking, stamping or spitting on the cross is a vital hateful satanic ritual, everyone knows that, and it is one of the most important rituals practiced by the Raelians. Then there is the one about a group of persons surrounding another person lying on the ground, after which the person is left lying down, firmly held down by seemingly invisible hands. Some Raelians have sexual orgasms at those moments, while others feel depressed. But all feel hysterical, rolling around on the grass screaming, yelping and howling in apparent ecstasy, as Philippe told me. I ask you, for someone who preaches high technology, is it not weird and out of character to indulge in such pagan acts? Remember this passage from the scriptures. He transforms himself into an angel of light and stirs up the children of men to all manner of secret works of darkness. He who claims to preach atheism, is Virilm not contradictory and wrong to be animated by such ridiculous hatred towards Jesus? Which hatred makes him to order people to stamp on the cross and sign apostasy acts. And we know that Satanists are those who stamp, spit and urinate on the cross in their ceremonies. Therefore, there is absolutely no way that Claude Virilm met with Yahweh, the leader of Elianan, since that same leader sent messengers asking me to oppose Virilm and to write a message denouncing his. Surely in that case, one of us tells the truth, or at least is on the side of God, and the other one is therefore a liar and very much anti-God? There is, therefore, no truth in Virilm's claim that he was sent by Yahweh. He is definitely a Satanist. You, the readers, we the judges. He spoke of Moses, but Moses himself, if he came back now, would not be pleased to know that Satan's son has used his name to promote Satan on earth. Who then is Claude Virilm? He wrote of himself, I was born on September 30, 1946 at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was a very difficult birth. But what's important is that I was conceived on December 25, 1945. My life began with a coincidence, born of an unknown father. I cannot say that I had an average childhood. I was what they call a natural child. An accident, as it were, and on top of that, oh, sacrilege, a Jewish refugee. My birth was concealed as much as possible, not in a cave, but in a clinic in Vichy. Then we returned to Ambert near to where her father lived, where my poor mother tried for a long time to pretend that I was the son of a friend whom she was taking care of for a while. If he held it against her after learning the truth, he was the nicest of grandfathers towards me, during the short time that I knew him. I was raised by my grandmother and aunt. It is only recently that my grandmother told about the strange machine that she saw over Ambert in 1947, flying noiselessly and very fast near her house. It was only after reading my book that she decided to tell me about it. At the time she joined Madge, his movement as it was known then. In Ambert was an old man. They nicknamed him Jesus Christ, because he had very long hair rolled in a bun, and a magnificent beard. He lived 100 meters, 328 feet, from the house where my mother had a small apartment. Children laughed and mocked him. Personally, I did not like to play with the others, preferring to contemplate insects. I often passed the man in the street and was surprised by the mischievous smile that he had when he looked at me. I didn't know why, but he did not frighten me. One afternoon I followed him. And I saw him enter his small house, leaving the door open. I approached and I saw him, sitting on a stool, and, as if he was expecting me, with a teasing smile, he motioned for me to come nearer. He laid his hand on my head and I felt a strange sensation. At the same time he looked toward the sky and pronounced words that I did not understand. After a few minutes he let me go, without saying a word and with the same mysterious smile. It was only in the summer of 1974, while reading a book, that I learned that Father Desart, the old man in question, was the Pope of Druids, the last still alive, and who died a few years ago. I know exactly to whom he spoke, looking towards the sky and pronouncing those mysterious phrases. Just as I know now and exactly what the luminous and silent machine was, that my grandmother had seen. I was 7 years old when that incident took place. The 9 of Satan. 9 seems to be a fatidic number for those people who are key personalities in the Satan business. Before anything else, may I point out that 666 equals 9, 6 plus 6 equals 12 plus 6 equals 18, 1 plus 8 equals 9. In the lives of all antichrists, 9 is the number that always comes up. Aleister Crowley was a true anti-Messiah according to himself, and according to his book of law which he wrote when he came out. Its first publication was 9 months before the outbreak of the Balkan War. Its worst victim was the Near East. Its second publication came 9 months before the outbreak of the World War. Victim, the West. Its third publication came 9 months before the outbreak of the Sino-Japanese War. Victim, the Far East. Its fourth publication came at 6:22 in the morning of the 22nd of December, 9 months before the Munich betrayal. Britain was its victim. Rael, being also an antichrist, finds himself pointed at and accused, and plagued by the number 9, or 666, in all major or noticeable events of his life. And as long as he lives, 9 shall continue pointing at him and marking events in his life. Let us see if I am right. He wrote, "At the age of 9, everything changed. First I discovered the speed of wheels with or without motor. My decision was made, I would become a racing driver. Nothing else interested me, and I did not see any use in learning all the things they told me at school, since I was going to be a racing driver." The comic strips were replaced by very serious automobile magazines. It was also at 9 years old that I was just sent to boarding school. My mother, because I didn't want to do anything at school, I didn't need this to become a racing driver, had decided to put me at a Notre Dame de France private school. She hoped that this way I would put myself to work. And in a way, she wasn't far wrong, but I have unpleasant memories of that first boarding school. I remember many nights crying in that huge dormitory, where what I believe I missed most was the possibility of being alone to meditate, at 9. This, as well as my emotional and affective need, which made me cry all night long, increased my already great sensitivity. The most surprising was that even though I had not been baptized, I was in a private boarding school run by Catholic brothers, with all that it implies: prayers before eating, before going to bed when we got up, before studying daily Mass with communion. After 6 months of daily communions, the brothers were horrified when they discovered that I had not been baptized. I thought it was funny, In fact, it was the only part of their mass which I liked, this free tasting of crumbs of bread. It was also at 9 years that I reached the age of puberty. I enjoyed it very much, and it was even a consolation for my incomplete solitude, discovering unknown and secret pleasures which no other 9-year-old children in the dormitory seemed to know about yet. Finally, it was also at the age of 9 that I fell in love for the first time. She was almost 9. Her name was Brigitte. I then went to the 6th grade, still without the slightest liking for my studies. But we kept changing classes. Consequently, I was always away from her and I almost stopped working. So much so that I found myself back in a boarding school in Cunhat, after being thrown out. It was even worse there than in Puy-en-Velay. We were one on top of the other in bunk beds in a small dormitory. There was virtually no discipline, and the biggest, namely the strongest kids, enforced the law. One day, fed up with being bullied by the strongest boys and with no disciplinary measures taken against them, I took to the road on foot, determined to make the 30 kilometers to my mother's house. Nobody had noticed my departures, and when the school principal finally reached me with his car, I had already nearly walked 10 kilometers. To my great joy, I was kicked out in the middle of the school year and brought back to the brothers at Ambert as a day student. Being less and less interested in studies, I started to taste the full joys of playing truant, especially as I didn't particularly appreciate finding myself at the priest's who had advised my mother to have me baptized. Fortunately, she preferred to wait until I was old enough to understand so she could ask my opinion. What I would have liked at the time was to become a mechanic, because it was useful for a racing driver. My mother, who would have liked me to become an engineer, did not allow me to become a garage apprentice. At that new vexation, I started taking walks in the country with a notebook in my hand, instead of going to classes. At 14, I was back in boarding school, this time in Mount Dore, in the grammar school where they accept children not wanted by all the other schools in the other regions. I was among a group of dunces and some fairly interesting hard cases. It was one of the hard-headed ones, one of the leaders who was responsible for the orientation of the next 10 years of my life. He played the electric guitar, which quite impressed me. It was during the summer vacation that I learned about physical love. The following year I was 15 and had more desire than ever to live my life. One day, I grabbed my guitar and a small suitcase. I said goodbye to the boarding school with its uninteresting studies and hitchhiked my way to Paris. I went to bed with a bar dance hostess in a hotel. I spent my second night in the metro with the bums. I spent the whole day just hanging around. I lived like that for 3 years, often sleeping anywhere and eating a sandwich from time to time. I was imagining my name in big letters, taken from pages 143 to 164 of his book The Message. I decided to reproduce these few sentences for those who will find it difficult to get hold of Verilne's book. I think they are the only important parts of Claude Verilne's earlier life to be considered, which had any, and the most profound effect on him, and which helped to create the man who became the French Antichrist that he is now. Claude Verilne's early life is similar and easily comparable to Mussolini's, but much more disturbing. His mother had a short relationship with a Jewish immigrant, and the man disappeared out of his mother's life before he was born. He obviously did not love her, as Verilne's own book suggests that he never met him. Here I will remind the reader that I wondered whether we were to believe what Verilne said, that the extraterrestrial was his father. And if yes, who was he? Verilne himself claims that the Jew was not his biological father. Rather than that, his mother had been kidnapped by extraterrestrials led by Satan, and inseminated with Satan's sperm. His mother was very deeply ashamed of being pregnant with him, so ashamed that his birth was hidden away in the secrecy of a private clinic. She refused even to tell her own father that Claude was her child. Instead, she passed him off for the child of a friend. And in so doing, she did not show any affection toward him. Then she handed him over to be brought up by his grandmother and his aunt. Many children are brought up by their grandparents. My grandmother and my aunt also raised me too, but my mother certainly did not reject me, nor lie about me, or about what relation I was to her. Obviously this child must have asked questions about his father, and he was told that he was a Jew. a Jew that was never there to take care of him and love him in his formative years, like all the other fathers did with the other children in his village. Let us not forget all the teasing. I have told about the teasing in my own childhood. Such a situation can create deep-seated hatred in a child's heart. Anyway, without a father and no closeness with his mother, the child became withdrawn, a total loner. Virilm hated religion and everything connected with worship and belief in God. So deeply ingrained in him was his hatred of religion that he was absolutely terrified at the idea of being baptized. Benito Mussolini was exactly like that as a child. Mussolini was a Satanist of the worst kind, and the signs of his demonic state appeared in him when he was just a young boy. In Benito Mussolini by Christopher Hibbert we read, "On Sundays when Rosa, his mother, took her children to Mass, Benito would lag behind the others kicking at the stones with his bare feet. He would never stay very long in a church. The smell of incense made him feel sick," he said, while the colors of vestments, the lights of candles, and the singing and the noise of the organ, all upset him profoundly. He waited for the others to come out sitting at the top of a tree and throwing stones at the children on their way to Sunday school. This was the typical description of a Satanist, or of someone possessed by an evil spirit. They hate the worship of God. Mussolini had been possessed from childhood, which accounts for the behavior described above, concerning the aversion that he had to going into church buildings, and the strange behavior he had when he found himself in one. A film was made in the theme of the Antichrist, entitled The Omen. The child actor who played the Antichrist, Damian Thorne, in the first part, behaved just like Mussolini when he was a child. Most children dislike going to places of worship because of the discipline and silence required of them, but they usually quickly adapt. Claude's strong hatred of religion was rather unusual. But also let us not forget whom Claude, the child, was. It was not difficult for Satan to telepathically stop his mother from christening him. Also, not too far lived a druid whom he acknowledges had acted as his personal watcher. Druids were never reputed religious people. Rather, they were powerful medicine men, but some of them were also enchanters, wizards, magicians and staunch occultists. And their methods, according to established religions, went quite against God's will. But as I say, not all were like that. All the children feared the old occultist, but the little Antichrist and self-confessed son of Satan was attracted to him, well, like attracts likes. The druid was obviously no ordinary druid. This one was in contact and acted as a guardian to the little devil child. Then, at age 7, the child was consecrated to Satan by the druid. If only Claude would tell us the whole story. After this, a lot of changes began occurring in him. He was difficult to control, given to violent and exaggerated screaming fits of anger if he did not get what he wanted. The devil was in him and was already animating him. The same thing was also said of Benito Mussolini. Fernando Mezzosoma summed him up this way. No one understands him. By turns shrewd and innocent, brutal and gentle, vindictive and forgiving, great and petty. He is the most complicated and contradictory man I have ever known. He cannot be explained. Christopher Hibbert wrote of little Benito Mussolini, he was a difficult child, disobedient, quarrelsome, self-willed and moody. He lost his temper quickly when provoked, often came home with his clothes torn and his face scratched and bleeding after fighting. Also he stabbed a boy who pushed his hand while he was writing, on the bottom with a penknife. According to Hibbert, little Mussolini had only one friend, a boy with a skull so thick that he let Benito amuse himself by hitting him hard with a brick. And like Virilm, he had a ferocious temper. By the age of 9 Virilm was actively masturbating. Such early sexual awareness denotes demonic possession. As we saw above, Claude behaved very much in the same way as Mussolini, hating religious services. Also, he was a weakling. And I have met Virilm, he is puny. He was the choice victim to the bullies, and took it very personally when these ones were not punished. And he would say that such a child can only see what people do to him. Even if the bullies were suspended, he would still have thought that they always got away with it. So he ran away. He was not in the least interested in school or in getting an education, and only did well sometimes when he was in a class with a little girl that he fancied. He regularly played truant, being thrown out of all the schools he was put into. The same thing was said of Mussolini. It is said that he hated school and was frustrated by the strict rules, the interminable sermons and the lectures on sins. Even so, despite his hatred of education, great plans were forming in his young mind. His brother and sister remembered that he was a dreamer. He could sit 4 hours with his chin on his hands. One day, he said to his mother, "I shall astonish the world." Even though he was a weakling, Viril was nonetheless restless and evil. As an older boy, he went to a special school for hopeless cases and dunces, those on whom society has given up. Again he ran away, this time for good to Paris, where he slept with a prostitute the first night. Then he began the life of a bum. The same again was said of Mussolini concerning his sexual activities, his corporal hygiene and his frequent visits to prostitutes. His first mistress was the wife of a soldier, and he treated her with violent ruthlessness. Our love was wild and jealous, he admitted with a kind of savage exultation. I did what I liked with her. Again we fall on these prophetic words, Hibbert wrote. They fought, quarreled and fornicated. Once he stabbed her, driving the knife which he carried still, deep into the flesh of her thigh, and always he abused her and bullied her and made love to her violently and selfishly. She was not the first woman he had treated so. Everybody knows how much violent sex is connected with Satanism and devil worship, and Mussolini certainly does Satanism justice. He visited prostitutes and caught venereal disease. He also loved raping women and boasted about being a rapist. He wrote about one unashamed rape. Her name was Virginia. One day I took her up the stairs, threw her onto the floor behind the door and made her mine. She got up crying, and insulted me between her sobs. She said that I had violated her honor. I probably had, but what sort of honor? And that from a man who intended to rule the world. What protection and what kind of justice could anyone expect from such a beast? A lady friend of his, Angelica Blabanoff, said of Mussolini, he rarely washed. He was also neurotic, excitable, self-pitying, excessively blasphemous, vindictively revengeful, constantly boasted of his virility. Some other friends thought he was mad. He wandered the streets drinking or indulging his craving for sexual excitement. He made love to any girl who would have him and threatened to rape any girls who would not, and he contracted syphilis. With no qualifications and no proper education, unloved, mentally scarred, and full of anger, Claude Viril by now had built himself a dream world in his mind. He, the bastard son of a Jew, will show them. He would be rich, he would be powerful, he would be famous. His aim was to become a racing driver. With luck, he went singing in a cabaret. His love of fame and need of recognition shows in the fact that he copied the lyrics of the one and only little hit song that he recorded, in full in his book, to remind the readers of his book, in case they had forgotten or didn't know. Then his dreams of becoming a racing driver were dashed after he had an accident. Viril again was angry against fate and against God. Yes, God. Because Claude Viril knows very well that God exists. All that time he spent in Catholic schools means that he knows the truth. But he judged that he had been dealt a raw deal. God dealt him a very raw deal. Why had nothing ever been right for him? Why did his mother not acknowledge him? Why was the Jew who was supposed to be his father, and who was supposed to have acted as a father, never there? Why did he not have a daddy like all the other children? In a country where such things matter, being in such a situation can be very traumatic for a child. Why could he not become a racing driver? And why did he have such a tiny body? Claude began to reject everything in his day-to-day life, and in the whole world. And behind the loner at heart that he had always been, he hid his feelings and inner thoughts, and he began to read a lot. He wanted another world, his own world. Because the one he lived in disappointed and dissatisfied him. He was angry, and most of all with the Jews. One of them, his so-called father, had rejected him. Surely they were all bound to be the same. Then Satan, with his extraterrestrial renegades, came along and dropped it all in his lap: fame, fortune, power, world domination, and revenge against the Jews. He did not hesitate, he hasted to go and tell his story about the extraterrestrials to the media. And do not forget, I fought for 37 years against publishing this message you are holding. Claude Varil has no academic qualifications, no proper education, yet he is now being worshipped by over 50,000 totally hypnotized and brainwashed followers who, at his command, let themselves be sexually used by totally uncaring people even though they do not really like it. Followers who keep him and his mistress in luxury and comfort, have kept and helped him take care of his children. Followers with whose hard-earned money he has provided himself with a rich holiday camp business, a home in Spain and the high-class, 5-star jet-setting lifestyle. Distinguished scientists, neurologists and biologists have offered their services to him, free of charge. All of this even though they could easily find out the truth by simply picking up the Bible and reading it, to realize that he had lied to them all this time. But it was not only those who did not know the scriptures who became his faithful followers. Many Roman Catholic priests and who knows how many other religious ministers left their own churches and lineages, apostasied officially and followed him. So how did Claude Varil, a scarcely educated ex-school dropout, an ex-bum, a failed singer and failed magazine publisher, a man who has virtually never done any proper work most of his life, how did he suddenly become the much-worshipped, power-wielding prophet Rael, who has now managed to manipulate some of the most intelligent brains in France and in the world, to follow him and do his bidding in such a sheep-like obedience? The same question was asked about Rasputin, Mussolini, and Hitler. And the answer is the same: they got their power from one same powerful, non-human, extraterrestrial source, Satan. Rasputin brought down the Russian Empire. Karl Marx was a Jew, but thousands suffered because of him. He renounced Judaism, and came up with a political system. When time came to discredit the Jews, he and his ideas were denounced as being part of a Jewish plot to take over the world. Hitler's poison gas crimes are a historical curse and a blot on the lovely German people of today. And Mussolini poison-gassed the Abyssinians. Now Claude Varil has been motivated and sent by Satan too. And as soon as it happened, Varil began tying people with invisible chains, sealing them on the front to be lost, and teaching Aryan doctrines, corrupting people and reducing them into a pitiful state of controlled madness. Now he has made it clear, he wants the whole world under his perverted backside, to sit upon. So again, I call on all governments, all heads of states of the world, stop him now. As I have disclosed, the millennium really fell on the year 1993, not in the year 2000. And that year has come and gone. We must begin watching the skies for signs, waiting and praying. UFOs are some of the signs, and time is coming soon when today's governments will but never be able to cover up the fact of their existence, that we are not alone in this universe.